And so with this sell-off in the market, this is flushing out a lot of leverage traders that were longing the market for Bitcoin. So maybe Bitcoin wicks below 100K according to Benjamin Cowan for a bit, then rebounds back to $103,000 to $104,000 for a few days. Well, tomorrow is the labor market report, CPIs next week, then the FOMC the week after. So there's plenty of catalysts for narrative shifts so people can blame the volatility on something. And right along cue with the global money supply pulling back for M2, Bitcoin is pulling back as well too. And so if this correlation is accurate for M2, well, we all know what comes next for Bitcoin. And if we look at the price chart right here, I made a video about this about 3 weeks ago, talking about a macro bearish divergence for Bitcoin to experience a much larger pullback. And we could be going through that right now with this pullback. With this drop, it's bringing Bitcoin to around 10%. If we look at the last bull run cycle on this pullback right here below the high, it was about 25% for Bitcoin. And if we look at the relative strength index, it's sitting at about 42, and the stochastic RSI here on the bottom of the screen, the K line and the D line are at 5 and 10, below 20. So we can see last bull run before the peak came in, along with Bitcoin stock to flow rainbow indicator during light green, when the relative strength index was around 40, was roughly right here when the price crashed down to $44,000. Then we saw a short-term recovery in the price and then a drop further to the downside to about $40,000 for that 20% dip, and a bullish divergence on the stochastic RSI to put in a higher low before the markets reverse back to the upside in Q4 of 2021. So right now on the right hand side of the screen, with this pullback for Bitcoin, I do expect this to get bought up at some point. The real question is if we get rejected from this descending resistance or a lower low in Bitcoin's price chart before we start the reversal, or if we start the reversal from here. This is what I talked about in my previous video, where I did expect Bitcoin to pull back closer to $100,000, potentially back down to $98,000, which is where we were at during this consolidation phase for February 2025, and also right here before the breakout. That would be the best opportunity in my mind to be able to buy more crypto, because I'll be watching the relative strength index to finally reset closer down here to 30 or below 30. And then also what I would look for is some type of divergence on either the relative strength index or the stochastic RSI to be putting in a higher low, while the price chart could potentially be putting in a lower low. That would be a great entry point in my position, because that would be a massive bullish divergence. For example, on the left-hand side of the screen, that's what we saw right here for Bitcoin after that massive sell-off. We saw it get bought up for this recovery rally, and then a final lower low right here on the price chart. Whereas as you can see on the stochastic RSI, once we bottomed out down here on that recovery, we experienced a bullish cross, then a bearish cross, and then a higher low, which was a major reversal signal that momentum was shifting from bearish momentum in this downtrend right here for Bitcoin to bullish momentum to break the descending resistance. Whereas the relative strength index didn't see a divergence, but we saw the RSI bottom out here at about 34, and then the MACD experienced a bullish cross right here on this second bottom, which was a higher low before the reversal. So on the right hand side of the screen, I would expect it to play out somewhat similar, depending on how low Bitcoin goes in the short term, for there to be a recovery rally back down to this descending resistance right here, potentially a lower low, very well possible, like I mentioned in previous videos, to $98,000, causing the relative strength index to bounce up in the short term and then drop all the way down here closer to 30. The stochastic RSI to rally up in the short term and then experience either a higher low or an equal low to where it bottomed out right here on the 31st of May. If we see this bullish divergence take place on the stochastic RSI and the relative strength index is all the way down here at 30 or below 30, I'm going to be extremely bullish on a macro reversal for Bitcoin, along with the rest of the market. But if he's saying that's why Bitcoin will fail, and Bitcoin's main utility is store value because there's faster currencies out there like SUI or even Solana, specifically XRP, that's used for cross-border payments, then in the long term, that's what XRP wins. And it's undeniable, which is why XRP has held up incredibly well since December of 2024. And it's just been ranging sideways between resistance, which is $3.40, and support all the way down here at $1.60, but ultimately holding up above $2. So I talked about this in a previous video, where the expectation for XRP, once it broke this descending resistance right here, was to rally all the way back up to this level right here at roughly $2.50 to potentially $3. As you can see, we made it all the way up to $2.66, and then reverse back to the downside to come here within this zone again to backtest this range and allow the relative strength index to reset, the stochastic RSI to reset, and the MACD to reset as well too. And that's what's happening right now. So the relative strength index is at 32. The stochastic RSI for the K line, the D line is at 7 and in 2. So I still think there's further to the downside. We're going to be looking for divergences on the chart, and I'll be sharing those with you guys on this channel. So I do think there's a little lower to go for XRP. Maybe we experience a rally in the short term, but I do think we do have a little further to the downside before we see a reversal, and we're just going to watch that on the chart. But in terms of the macro, it depends on your guys' strategy. Should you buy? Should you sell? Should you hold right now? Well, I give no financial advice. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I will tell you what I see on the charts. In terms of the macro, the smartest investors in the world accumulate when higher time frames are in oversold conditions. So we're on the 4-hour candles right now. If we go to the daily, we can see that on the stochastic RSI, the K line and the D line are at 27 and 31. So we're not quite down below 20. Relative strength index is at 37. And we are in a downtrend right now. So it's not terrible, but it just shows that there could be more price action to the downside, a little bit further of a sell-off. If we zoom out even more to the weekly, we can see the bottom of the screen on the MACD, on the histogram. Momentum has shifted from bearish to bullish, but with this sell-off, we see two larger red bars right here on the histogram. The MACD is still in a downtrend right now. We haven't experienced a bullish cross. Relative strength index is at 49, so we're in the middle of a range. And on the stochastic RSI, we're at 26 and 18 and just experienced a bearish cross. So I think this is a fake out on the stochastic RSI for us to come down a little bit further before we reverse to the upside. And as you guys can see in the price chart, we are in this downtrend right here for XRP. It looks like there's a massive amount of momentum in favor of the bears right now, and also this zone of support right here that it wicked off of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 on this candle close is a very likely scenario for XRP before we break this descending resistance on the weekly and then eventually break out towards the end of this year. Now,